What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the PikiPikaPapa, and for the last 14 glorious months, in the middle of every single month, I pour myself a big old glass of unsweet tea, I get out my computer, I put Pokedata.io on one screen, and I pull up my massive Pokemon data Excel spreadsheet on the other one, and then I hard key in the top 20 singles card prices from every single regular set from the Sword and Shield era, the XY era, the Sun and Moon era, and now I do it for the Scarlet and Violet era as well. And it sounds like a huge undertaking, which it is, but I'm excited and I'm happy that I've done the work, because I think as we continue to get deeper into Scarlet and Violet, we're able to do some comparisons here for the end of the Sword and Shield era and how it performed after that. Like, I think we're gonna be able to take a whole lot of really cool learnings from it. And the other reason I did it too is because, think about it, I know a lot of people use TCG Player for their pricing, but TCG Player only represents TCG Player sales, and you only have 1 year's worth of information there. And for a lot of these cards, that's kind of like reading the last chapter of a book, right? You miss all the twists and turns and how things began and the developmental of the character stories and all of that. And so I always wanted more than just a 1 year price graph, and that's why, you know, personally, I love Pokedata.io so much, because not only does it include TCG Player if you filter for that, it also includes eBay, and you can look at PSA grades and all kinds of stuff. So anyways, that's not the point of this, but I'm really glad that I started this journey into aggregating all of this information, because in the slides ahead, we'll look at the individual sets, we'll look at the individual cards, we'll see how they've moved month over month. But what's cool to me is, like I said, I take all of those cards, so you think about it, 12 different sets from every era had booster boxes, right? The top 20 cards, so you have 240 total cards, and I aggregate all of those prices, and you can see for the Sword and Shield era, when I first did this back in September, the aggregate of those prices was $6,790, and then you can see how the prices have moved over time. And the cool thing with this is you can see where the market was completely and totally irrational, right? You see where the booster boxes started to sell out at the Pokemon Center here in the US, and everything went crazy. Booster box prices spiked, alt arts went through the roof, just absolute insanity, right? I mean, look at from April all the way till June, that is a crazy price spike. And we talked about it on this channel. We said, listen, this isn't normal, this isn't natural, this is FOMO at its finest. It is going to come back down, right? And you see that afterwards, it did come down. Now, the last couple months, really the last 4 months, has been kind of interesting to kind of see how that's moved, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But again, because we aggregated this 14 months ago, you can see that, listen, if in September you had gone ahead and bought one of every of the top 20 singles cards back then, even with all the ups and downs, the sideways, the turbulence in the hobby, Sword and Shield going out of stock, Scarlet and Violet coming in play, all of these things, the aggregate value is still up 22.6%, which is really cool. And the other thing that I wanted to call out is, because we've been doing this for so long, we can understand some trend lines, which is really interesting. We've been able to see when cards hit certain support lines, and we're saying, hey, listen, we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we've seen this pattern before, and a lot of times it's able to kind of give us a little bit of a preview before a card pops off. And there's a couple examples of that in this video, but the biggest takeaway for me in these top 20 singles cards aggregate is what's happened over the last 4 months. So remember, from July to August, it was still coming down. August to September is when the price started to flatten out a little bit, right? It was down, but it was only down 0.26%. And then in October, it dropped again. And so it was down 3.54%. And now in November, it's starting to pop back up. Now, that might sound like a whole lot of irregularities to you, but what I care about is this line right here. It is starting to flatten out, and we're starting to find some support lines for some of these really awesome Sword and Shield cards. Now, that doesn't mean there's a new bottom. It doesn't mean these cards are about to pop off, but as a channel that really focuses on the data and the trends, that's something really interesting. And we will see as we continue to do this every single month what happens. But this is something that I've got an eye on. I think that Sword and Shield singles cards might be in a really cool spot right now, and I do think we might see some growth over the next couple months. So of course, we look at the singles cards, we've got to look at the booster box prices too. And I know everybody who watches this channel does not need to be convinced that sealed investing in the Pokemon space is almost a home run every single time. But when you look at it right here from Sword and Shield, which obviously was one of the best eras of recent memory, look at the booster box prices. I mean, it went through the same crazy pop that we saw, right? That we saw in the singles cards, but you didn't see the subsequent drop. Did they come down? A little bit, sure. But did they see that extreme drop like we saw in the singles cards? Absolutely not. And now it's continuing to go up. So the same thing, remember, the singles cards from September till now was up 22%, but booster boxes are up 50% over that same time period. So this again represents if you had bought one of every single booster box, so one of all 12 booster boxes from the Sword and Shield era, you'd be up 50%, which is just It's wild, right? So now we're going to get into the single sets. We're going to get into the single cards. We're going to talk about some trends that we've seen and some things that we've called out and have a ton of fun throughout the course of the video. But this is a lot of work, so I got to give my selfish plug. Listen, if you enjoy this type of content, we do it all the time. I have a huge data warehouse I love sharing with you. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you like what you see, give us a thumbs up. If you have questions, comments, drop them down below. You know, I always believe, listen, there's no shortage of people who will tell you what to do, but I believe in kind of telling the why behind it, right? So that's what we do here on the channel. Now, the first sets we're going to look at, we start from newest to oldest. So we got Silver Tempest and we have Lost Origin. And last month, we made this call out. We said the Giratina is starting to take a run. Now, as you can see, Lost Origin, this chase card up there is up 12% month over month. So obviously, you know, we were able to understand that, and I'll show you the graph here in a minute, which will let us to think that. But Lost Origin and Brilliant Stars, we'll talk about Brilliant Stars in a minute. I really like the lineup for both of those sets. And Lost Origin booster boxes is already up at $237, which is nothing to shake a fist at. But we'll see Brilliant Stars booster boxes are about $50 below that right now. So the other thing that is I call out is, listen, Silver Tempest is still available on the Pokemon Center here in the US in terms of booster boxes. I don't think we know what Silver Tempest is capable of until those booster boxes go out of stock, and even then I think we're gonna have to wait a couple months after that. But I don't know if they printed a ton of Silver Tempest. I don't know if the demand is super low. I don't know what is going on, but it has sure held on much longer than I think at least I anticipated. But I will say this, the Lugia had a really strong month, right? The card's back up over $175. Wildly popular Pokemon, really cool artwork on it. So that card is doing really well. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is obviously Surging Sparks just dropped, which is a Pikachu set. Duh, we all know that. But don't sleep on Lost Origin Pikachu cards, right? We have a couple really cool Lost Origin Pikachu cards that are in this set, so it'll be interesting to see if there's kind of a halo effect with everybody focusing on Pikachu now with Surging Sparks, if that's going to kind of bleed off into some of these other really cool, more recent Pikachu cards as well. So with that being said, let's look at the Giratina card because I think this is really interesting. Again, you know, we kind of had this feeling last month when we did this video. You know, we said the Tina's starting to take a run, don't sleep on it. And you see over the last month, it's up 12.73%. But you might be wondering like, hey, what was it that led you guys to think that? Well, one of the things that we've been talking about here is you saw how the top 20 singles cards, their aggregate value kind of spiked and came back down. And we talked about how the last couple months, it's kind of been going up and down a little bit. Well, we saw that it hit the $320 mark, and that felt like a really nice round number. Again, I don't see this card dropping much below $300. And then as it started to tick up, you see that these cards can bounce, right? The market will go irrationally up and it'll also go irrationally down at times. So you'll never know where the top is. You'll never know where the bottom is. But if you can find a really strong price point where you think it's a very fair price for a really awesome card, you can't argue with that, right? Like at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do. And that gives us a great opportunity for success in the future. So we saw the Giratina with this really sharp crash. We knew it was one of the top 3 cards from the Sword and Shield era, and then we started to see it bounce a little bit, and we said, hey, listen, this thing could catch fire. It's been a really good month. We'll have to see what happens in the months ahead, but at least for 1 month, it's been really strong. The next sets we're going to talk about here, now this is the exact slide from last month, okay, and we had talked about a couple things. I mentioned it earlier. We talked about the booster boxes. I thought for both, you know, I thought both of these booster boxes represented really good value. Astral Radiance at 165, Brilliant Stars was at 181. And then we saw something going on in Brilliant Stars, right? The top 4 or 5 cards in Brilliant Stars had a relatively strong month. Nothing huge, but again, we started to kind of see the tides turn a little bit. We saw some strength where we haven't seen it in the past. And the other thing that I called out too is if you look at the average of the top 20 singles cards in Brilliant Stars last month versus the average of the top 20 singles cards in Astral Radiance last month, and this has been going on for a couple months, Astral Radiance actually had a higher average price point for the top 20 singles cards versus Brilliant Stars. And to me, that was crazy. I mean, the Brilliant Stars lineup, I mean, that is a really awesome lineup. I know that Charizard card is kind of, I won't say printed into the ground, but it's certainly been graded into the ground. But anyways, that was kind of the takeaway last month. And then this month, this is how these price graphs look. So we'll start off with the very bottom. You'll see that there was a very strong month in Brilliant Stars, right? Lots of price gains. You'll see a lot of green, not just green at the top, but green all the way through the top 15 cards. And then you'll start to see some regression there in Astral Radiance, right? So now it's inverted. It makes more sense to me because the average of the top 20 singles cards in Brilliant Stars is now higher than Astral Radiance. Not that I don't think Astral Radiance is an awesome set, but I do think Astral Radiance doesn't hold a candle to Brilliant Stars. And then look what happened to the booster boxes too. I mean, the booster boxes also had a really good month. Astral Radiance from a percentage standpoint had a better month, and Brilliant Stars is at $191. Again, remember, Lost Origin is up at almost $237 right now per booster box, and Brilliant Stars is a Charizard set, and again, it's got a really strong lineup. So sitting at $191 $191. That might be a really good, be a really good value. Again, you're paying over MSRP. There's all kinds of awesome opportunity in the Scarlet and Violet era too. So you got to make your mind up. What do you want to do with your Poké dollars? Do you want to spend it on the new ultra modern stuff where you might have to wait a little bit longer? Do you want to get in on Brilliant Stars booster boxes while they're still under $200 because you think they might hit 300, 400, 500, over the next 3 to 5 years as Sword and Shield gets older and older? Who knows? That's your decision to make, but it is interesting to see how these prices move over time. Next one's right here. Oh, of course, we got to talk about the Charizard, right? I'm sorry. So the Charizard is what I talked about here, and you'll see it's up 25% over the last 3 months. So remember, it was relatively flat there in the beginning, but then you see this big pop here over the last month. So the question is, are we going to see more of this in these chase cards, or is this going to be just like a temporary spike in price? Again, I've talked about how the markets can kind of move irrationally at times. So is this just a brief moment in time where the Charizard is popping up? Or, I mean, think about all of the Scarlet and Violet Charizards right now that are doing well. You got Paldean Fates, right? You got 151. Charizard is certainly having a moment in these ultra modern brand new cards. So this card was below price on both of those, sitting at $135. So a lot of people out there might have said, hey, listen, the 151 Zard, it's flirted with $200, right? The Paldean Fates one is way over $150 right now. So this Charizard, the alt arts are wildly popular. So maybe a bunch of people piled in and got the price back up. So we'll have to see if it can hold on for another month or so, but we'll see. The next one we're talking about, Fusion Strike and Evolving Skies. And I wanted to talk about the pattern that we had seen in Evolving Skies. So over the last 4 months, the 3 earliest months, Evolving Skies was down. So the average of the top 20 singles cards 4 months ago was down, 3 months ago was down, 2 months ago was down. Almost every time when we do this on the video and we see that the average of the top 20 singles cards is down 3 months in a row, we almost always see a little bit of growth after that. And then last month it was up 2%. And now Evolving Skies, and I certainly think Prismatic Evolutions is having a part of that, but Evolving Skies just went absolutely nuts. A lot of that's driven by the Moonbreon. The Moonbreon's up at almost $1,300. Matter of fact, if you use the TCG graph, which we'll look at in a minute, it's over $1,300, but almost all green in Evolving Skies. So I think that's really cool. The other thing that's interesting too is, the Rayquaza in Evolving Skies is doing good. It's not just the Umbreon, right? You got the number 1 and the number 2 card that are doing really well. And if you look at all of the sets, I mean, you can look at Sun and Moon, you can look at XY era. I mean, you can go back as far as you want, but having multiple raw cards over that $200 price point, it's not overly common, okay? And so I've always had this question, like, is Evolving Skies going to be that set that kind of breaks the trend? Are they going to have multiple cards over that $200 price point? It's got 4 of them at there right now, they're pretty solid over 200 at 229 and 257, and then obviously you get to 400 and 1300, so it'll be interesting to see. Now, the other thing that was interesting is Fusion Strike. If you remember a couple months back, the Gengar and the Espeon there, I mean, they were neck and neck. They were separated by, I think it was like $15, $20 at one point. Both of those cards were doing really well. Now, we've seen the Espeon come back down a little bit, and the Gengar's gone way, way, way up at $360. So that was just something that I thought was a big takeaway. Again, when you talk about the biggest cards from the Sword and Shield era, I think you got the Moonbreon, I think you got the Gengar from Fusion Strike, and I think you got the Giratina from Lost Origin. So it's interesting to see that Giratina pull away. Now, as I said, the Moonbreon's been going absolutely nuts, so we got to take a look at that. You'll notice there's a price difference between this graph right here and what I have hard keyed in. Again, I use Pokedata.io. I like it because it also includes eBay sales. I think eBay sales are wildly important. I think that's the best market to kind of get a barometer on the true value of your cards. But on TCG Player, the near mint right here has got a market price of $1,373. No matter how you skin it, over the last 6 months, over the last month, this card has been doing fantastic, absolutely phenomenal. I think it's exciting. I'm very happy that in the market we have an ultra modern card like this that can carry such a high price point. It's going to be interesting to see if it can maintain that. Like, is this going to be a $2,000 card in the next 3 years? I mean, it very well could be. It's just, there's a lot of lessons to take away from Evolving Skies. And, for me at least, whenever we understand what the big set of the Scarlet and Violet era is going to be, even if I have to buy booster boxes at $150, $170, it's going to be worth it, right? Because over the last 3 generations, like, there is always this one booster box which just seems to wildly outperform. So even if you pay MSRP for it, from a rate of return perspective, you're going to be well rewarded in the long run. So I don't know what the next Evolving Skies is. It probably won't be an Evolving Skies-esque set. When you look at the pull rates for Evolving Skies, they're far worse than Surging Sparks. They're far worse than Twilight Masquerade. Who knows what these next sets are going to have, but pull rates has a big reason why these cards are so expensive. So we'll see. We're going to play it out and see what happens. Now, Chilling Reign is a set, and is Chilling Reign coming to an end? Is the reign of Chilling Reign coming to an end? Who knows, but it has been performing softer than its peers, and now Chilling Reign, I love the artwork. I think it has one of the most amazing artwork lineups out of all of the sets. I love everything about it, but really if you just look at the names on the cards and nothing else, there is a little bit of star power that's lacking, and I know everybody loves the kick and chicken. We're gonna look at the graph there here in a minute, but Chilling Reign, I don't know, we're just gonna have to wait and see. Again, this is a great example of a set that the artwork is so awesome and it's so deep and it's so beautiful that we'll have to see if that's able to kind of hold the value of this over time. I certainly don't think the booster boxes are going to be going anywhere, but it's going to be interesting to see what these singles cards do over time. And then Battle Styles, again, another set that I think has some really cool artwork in it. You know, it kind of lacks some of the big alt art thunder that some of these other sets have. You got the Sleepy T-Tar there at the very top. You know, I think it's the best of the worst, right? Everybody knows that after Battle Styles, we get into the first 4 sets of the Sword and Shield era, and there's certainly a lot of opportunity in those sets, and I think that there's just not a lot of stuff to be excited about, but we're going to talk about it. So it's really interesting. Now, again, I mentioned the kick and chicken, right? You look at this right here. Where we've seen some of these other big alt art chase cards start to bounce a little bit, we're just starting to see the Blaziken kind of find its bottoms, kind of find its support line. So we talk about how cards like this, usually they settle around round numbers, which is really weird, but I mean, it could be like 200, 225, 250, just round numbers that make sense in the head. So this is getting really close to that $250 price point. So I'll be interested to see if this finds support at 250 and if it holds it for a while. And then if it does start to bounce a little bit, and if this starts to bounce, then I think it's going to be really good for Chilling Reign overall. But again, just a beautiful set. So you can't go wrong having Chilling Reign in your collection. Now, as I said, we get a lot less exciting moving on here. Darkness Ablaze, you know, that has the lowest top 20 average price out of all of the Sword and Shield era sets. The average of the top 20 cards is only $5, which is really bad, especially considering that that's a Charizard set, right? So this kind of goes to show you that not all Charizard sets are created equal. And I'll tell you what, you put Darkness Ablaze, the first Charizard set from Sword and Shield, up against Obsidian Flames, the first Charizard set from the Scarlet and Violet era, and I will take Obsidian Flames all day long and twice on Sunday. That Charizard, I think the artwork is even better. It's got abysmally low gem rates, right? We're already starting to see that Charizard grow in price a little bit. I think the PSA 10s of that card are up over $400 now. So anyways, we know that Obsidian Flames is going to be much better than Darkness Ablaze. So I mean, I'm going to do a video here where I compare the different eras, but I think Scarlet and Violet's in a really good position. And Vivid Voltage, honestly, Vivid Voltage is kind of anchored by that Rainbow Chunkachu, right? Like if it wasn't for that card being up over the $100 mark, the average of Vivid Voltage wouldn't be much better. Now, I do love that card when you think about iconic cards through kind of the pandemic, right? Like I hate to think about that era, but when everybody rushed in and FOMO'd into the Pokemon space, you know, that Rainbow's Pikachu right there was the card. I mean, this was it. So I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of fond memories. I don't think we're going to see a big price appreciation for till much further down the road. But I will say this card is a $100 card. No matter what happens in the market, this card always, up till now, always seems to find support at the $100 mark. So you can see 6 months ago, this was a $120, $125 card. It's been working its way back down. You see how it's starting to flatten out there in the $110 range, $105 range. So hey, listen, if you want a long-term play, or if you've always wanted this card in your collection, you know, again, I never know where the bottom is. My crystal ball doesn't work, but I do know that this card has been heavily supported at the $100 mark. So if you're interested in picking it up, you can get it in the $100 range. I do think there's a really solid floor built in for that. And then of course the final 2 sets, Rebel Clash and Sword and Shield, and I just take this as a great example of kind of a sealed rarity play, right? You look at these booster boxes and the Rebel Clash booster boxes, you know, at $223, it has absolutely no reason to be that high because most of the cards in there aren't very exciting. And then the same thing with Sword and Shield, you know, the booster box is up over $300 again. And then even look at the ETB for Rebel Clash, right? The Elite Trainer box for Rebel Clash is at $135. So when you're thinking about some of these sets that aren't overly exciting, right, there are going to be some rarity plays where even if they're not the most exciting set in the world, if you have the sealed product and people want it, people are always trying to complete full sets from eras of Elite Trainer boxes or booster boxes. And so there's always going to be some demand. And these are depreciating assets in the fact that they're always being ripped. So there's the, you know, the overall population is always decreasing. That's a better way to say it versus depreciating asset. But the overall population is always decreasing. So we shall see. But again, Not a lot here. I will say the Snorlax from Sword and Shield, even though it's had a rough couple months, if you look at it over the last year, I mean, it's up. It's not up from much. I mean, it was at $25 a year ago. It got really crazy at one point, went all the way up to $50, $52. It's been slowly working its way down since, and when I look at that graph on the right, to me, and I've looked at a ton of graphs, it looks like it's going to continue to drop down a little bit. Obviously, the Marnie card is the other, I won't call it a chase card, but the other card over $30 in the Sword and Shield set. So my wife loves Marnie. I got a PSA 10 of that card right over my shoulder, so we shall see which card ends up being number one. But interesting to watch, not a lot of excitement, but I will say this, what is exciting is if you've made it to the end of this video, if you love this type of data-driven content and you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, I got a small channel here. The best way to say thank you for the work that we put in, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, or drop a comment down below. I appreciate you more than I can say. I hope you have an epic one, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.